What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday. Today, due to popular demand, we are going to be taking a look at the Neptune from X-Transbots and the Spindrift 2.0 from Fanstoys. Going to be comparing them in a heads-up battle. First, I have to thank Huang. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. A lot of people hit me up on different social medias asking if I wanted to take a look at their Neptune in order to do it, and I appreciate everybody that offered, but he happened to live like 20 minutes down from where I work, so I was able to meet up with him in person, exchange. It was actually done in a parking garage early in the morning while we were wearing masks because of COVID, and probably one of the shadiest looking things you've ever seen if you were watching from afar. That being said, special shout out to him. I do appreciate it. I haven't put it back into sea spray or sea boat mode yet, so I'm not sure if it survived, but fingers crossed. And actually, he may have said keep it in robot mode. I'm gonna double check. Anyway, I think it's gonna be interesting because the Fanstoys version 2.0, which I do like, and I have on my shelf and replaced my other one, it trades in a lot of sculpted detail, so it's going to lose that point. It also doesn't have a lot of the flash of paint that the X-Transbots has, so it's probably going to lose that point as well. So I just think there's going to be some interesting things to take away from this. So we're going to get into it. We actually have a number of verses coming here in the next month or so stay tuned. I also have a number of topics to discuss as well, so there's a lot going on. It's feast or famine. Anyway, let's do some house cleaning. We'll keep it brief. One, dummies from last week. A lot of people are writing now in the comments about Robert is just an imbecile. And look, you're not wrong. He's actually a very smart, kind, and loving and generous person. If you knew him, however, I see how he comes across that way. If you join the Patreon, you can listen to the Uncut, where my wife pretty much breaks his balls for 20 minutes of each episode, saying his collection is of no worth in terms of its display. Anyway, I get it. Then we had the Hasbro event wrap up, and most people were on board. There is a conversation there about the convert versus transform and all that. I'm just not all that interested in it. We've talked about it a bit on Nerd Rage Radio, our weekly podcast, so feel free to check that out. It's come up a couple times. I just don't have a whole lot to say about it. I understand it. Listen to Nerd Rage, we break it down a bit, or actually Joe S, I think, breaks it down a bit for us. And then there was a lot of fan-made stuff this week, which I just kind of dedicated it to. We do have some non-fan-made stuff coming, but I needed to get kind of some of this stuff out there. I'm lucky enough to have been sent some of this stuff to look at, so we have one more next week, and then we have something else that I think the week after. So I told you there was a lot coming in, and we're going to look at it. We also have some mainline stuff, and it's piling up. But yeah, I think that's it. So let's go ahead and get into this, and then we'll come back at the end and have, discuss anything that needs discussing, as it were. But first, we have to start
with accessories. And I don't think that it should come as any surprise to anyone that the X-Transbots certainly takes the lead for accessories. They threw everything at this. Beach supplies with a beach ball and a bucket and a shovel and skis, an extra head, guns, visors for swap out, translucent replacement parts, etc. And the Fanstoys comes with a set of guns and an extra head. Moving right on to gimmicks, once again, the Fanstoys has the little flip feature on the chest. The X-Transbots has that as well as the antenna. They both had the spinning propellers. That's kind of a gimmick, but the X-Transbots has the little things on the forearms. So X-Transbots once again takes the lead. So let's move on to build and materials. And I'll be honest with you, it's pretty even Steven. They're both pretty solid figures. The XTB takes a little bit more effort to kind of make sure everything is locked in, like to make sure the waist is locked in properly, to make sure that the knees are locked in properly, like all that stuff. But once it is, you're good. So I can't say that one is a clear standout winner materials-wise. They're going to have to tie in that regard. And the same kind of goes for the build, obviously, as a result. And then ultimately, the same goes for the hardware. They both use die-cast. Neither one of them use ratchets. Let me make sure that's true before I... Oh, no. We got ratcheted knees. So I'll give it to Fanstoys on hardware, but I'm going to tie them out for build and materials. Which brings us to sculpt and paint. Now, I'm not crazy about the character design of Sea Spray anyway, and I don't think that a super tune translation is necessarily accurate in order for it to be a good looking figure. For instance, I still like the original Sea Spray from Fanstoys. Doesn't look anything like the cartoon, but I like the way it looks. But I will say that there are things about this, just from the front, taking it in, so to speak, that I prefer about the Fanstoys. Namely, the lack of gap here in the shoulder compared to there. The pins there are a little unsightly, whereas this seems a little bit more clean and purposeful. I like a lot of this proportionately better than this. This seems long, like a bit too long to me, so to speak. I do like all of this better though, and I love the paint on this far more than how the Fanstoys one presents. So I like the paint better on the X-Transbots. I like the sculpt better on the Fanstoys just from the frontal view. Sculpt wise, starting with the head from the front, I like the proportions once again better on the Fanstoys. How the brim of his helmet, so to speak, kind of sits lower on the eyes, and then the eyes are a little bit tighter to the nose and mouthpiece. Like all of that looks much better to me, and I like the general shape of it better as well. However, the paint stands out more on the X-Transbots, and the silver paint on the face stands out more, so I prefer the paint once again on the X-Transbots. Looking at it from the side, I like both of them a fair bit. The problem is that the Fanstoys one, you can't really see it because of the angle of the propellers, whereas the X-Transbots propellers are angled back a bit, and I gotta say, I think I like that better overall. So I'm gonna give this to X-Transbots in both categories. Looking at the chest, the torso area, this one's really interesting. So I like the look of the X-Transbots better because I like the windows, I like the breakup, I like how much there is to see. However, I hate how long it is. Like SpongeBob square chest. And I like the paint. Whereas with the Fanstoys, I just kind of like the general shape. I like to do like the bump out piece in the center and the dimension that adds to it. But I don't know if the Fanstoys offers enough in a vacuum here for me to give it to them. From the side, it's pretty much the same party. I like the proportions better on the Fanstoys. I like the sculpt and paint better on the X-Transbots. So same situation pretty much. Once again here, comes down to a similar issue, except here I think the Fanstoys one is actually kind of wonky. They tie and sculpt the detail for the upper arm, and the lower arm is pretty much the same. The Fanstoys arm is actually more proportionate again, whereas the X-Transbots is just better painted and better looking in my opinion. Looking at it from the side, I think the X-Transbots takes it in sculpt and paint here. The Fanstoys one looks so simple. The hand almost gets lost in the sauce of all that stuff on the forearm. There's no definitive bicep or elbow. It just looks like a simple little nub. As far as the pelvis goes, I think Fanstoys takes this one. Both are painted, both sacrifice a little bit of sculpt, but the Fanstoys looks more purposeful. It looks less toy-ish. You don't see the pins, etc., etc. To me, this is a clear win for Fanstoys. From the side, I think it's less obvious. However, with the way that the universal is built on the X-Transbots, where it's exterior from the thigh and the Fanstoys thigh kind of holds the joint in and hides it a bit, I think still it's a clear win for Fanstoys. Looking at them from the front is tricky. I like the way the Fanstoys upper thigh meets at the hip, whereas the X-Transbots is sitting below the hip. I think that ends up making the Fanstoys one look better. However, I like the sculpted detail far more on the X-Transbots than I do on the Fanstoys, and I like the blue paint better, and I like the dark blue translucent on the bottom of the feet that hides a lot of the innards. So the Fanstoys honestly doesn't do enough for me here to take the category. Looking at them from the side, it's kind of negligible. So what I like about the X-Transbots is I like the heel, and I like the more like clearly defined flat surface of the foot. I also like that they seem to extend a bit more proportionately for the feet. But the Fanstoys is certainly cleaner, but I like the paint better on the X-Transbots. From the back, so to speak, once again, this is where Fanstoys is going to take the clear win because of the proportions, because the backpack hides a lot of the unsightliness. Everything looks cleaner, everything looks more purposeful, everything looks more accurate. It's just a better thing in that regard. And what we have here is a tied game, and a lot of this is because the X-Transbots paints a lot of it better and the Fanstoys sculpts a lot of it better. However, the X-Transbots does take some points here and there on the sculpt as well. So this might break down a little differently when we get to the final scores, but as for just an overall look at the sculpt and paint, it's 4-4. And it's interesting which 4 Fanstoys win, specifically the kind of back and front view, as when you isolate those looks, they don't necessarily hold up to a lot of what the X-Transbots does, which I do find interesting. It'll probably be a larger discussion point here. So let's go through articulation. So the head on the X-Transbots is a hinged swivel. You get up to there, so not the best, down to there, which is fine, and a swivel. The Fanstoys head operates the same way, but it doesn't use quite the same engineering. You get nothing really up, just the slightest bit. You get down a good bit and a swivel. The X-Transbot shoulders, you get out to 90 degrees on a universal, and you get around 360. You also get a bit of a butterfly both backwards on the initial hinge and forward on a secondary hinge. The Fanstoys is a straight universal, gets you up past 90 degrees and 360 around. Bicep swivel, bicep swivel. Double jointed elbow for the full run, single hinged elbow for 90 degrees. Wrist swivel with fingers on a base pin knuckle. Wrist swivel that's limited with fingers on a base pin knuckle. Waist swivel with an ab crunch. Waist swivel limited that distorts the mold with no ab crunch. Universal for a hip that gets you out 90 degrees, forward 90 degrees, and back 90 degrees. Universal for the hip that gets you out less than 90 degrees. It's ratcheted forward, which is nice, to about 90 degrees, and then back a bit as well. Thigh swivel, thigh swivel. Double jointed knee that gets you a little bit past 90 degrees, but it's barely worth mentioning. Single hinge knee that gets you a little bit past 90 degrees, but is barely worth mentioning. Ankle tilt up, ankle tilt down with a rocker that gets you an extreme angle. Ankle tilt up, ankle tilt down with a rocker that doesn't get you as much of an extreme angle, but should get you everything that you need. Now, this shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone who watches this channel regularly for the amount of criticism that I've given Fanstoys in regard to their articulation as of late, but X-Transbots takes this by a landslide. They take it at the shoulders, elbow for a double joint, wrist for the full rotation, torso for the ab crunch and swivel that doesn't distort the mold, and the hips is a technical win, although the Fanstoys hips get you everything you would want. The X-Transbots technically has a greater range, therefore takes it on a technicality. The Fanstoys doesn't take one single category and they tie out the rest. I tied the ankles because Fanstoys has a wider range of up and down, but X-Transbots has both. X-Transbots has a wider range of an ankle rocker, but Fanstoys has a range there as well, so I tied them out there.
Scale-wise, honestly, I think they're pretty negligible. If you look at the scale chart, Sea Spray's collar and Beachcomber's collar should be at about the same spot. Now, if you're looking at the X-Transbots footage on the left, that's not the same Beachcomber. So I'm going to bring in the X-Transbots for this. And yep, that's closer. So X-Transbots is going to take the scale department, which is interesting because it didn't, the X-Transbots Sea Spray doesn't scale properly with its own Beachcomber, but it does scale properly with the Fanstoys Beachcomber that does scale properly with most other things. Interesting. Transformation, honestly, should be a category where X-Transbots easily takes the win. However, this is a pretty straightforward transformation for Fanstoys. It's one of their best. It's simpler and more enjoyable, and it seems more purposeful than a lot of things that have to kind of move around and get out of the way of one another in the X-Transbots piece. So, surprisingly enough, I'm giving the transformation to Fanstoys this go round, if only by a nose. Alt mode. The Fanstoys goes for a more cartoon accurate look, but the X-Transbots goes for that classic approach in the Masterpiece line with the more realistic looking alt mode, and I prefer it. So in your own personal score, I could see how you could very well tie these out. However, I'm giving it to X-Transbots because I think it's a better looking alt mode.
All right. Which one looks better?
I think I like the one better on the left, but my first reaction was the right because I like that blue paint, but I don't like how glossy it is, so I think I'm going to say the one on the left.
All right, and pick them up.
Yeah, I still like this one.
Okay.
All right, which one looks better?
Probably this one.
Okay, and pick them up. Which one feels better to you?
Probably this one.
Okay, thank you. Which one looks better?
This one.
You're talking about this one, just to be clear? Okay, and then I'll pass them to you. Which one feels better?
That one.
This one? Okay, thank you. Which one looks better?
This one.
This one? Okay, and I'll pass them to you. Which one feels better?
That one.
This one? Okay.
Accuracy wise, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think either one of them nailed it. I think that the proportions in the upper body, as wonky as they are, and as much as I don't care for them, I think X-Transbots got better, but I think the lower part of the body, the lower legs, really specifically, as well as the proportions of the shorter arms, Fanstoys got better. So
Honestly, I'm going to tie them out, but I don't think either of them nailed it, and I think that's probably for the best, but maybe that's a conversation for another time. Which brings us to our final scores. They tie in the build and materials because they both feel good. They both have good plastics. They both use die cast. The build is good on both. However, the torso leaves a little bit to be desired with the X-Transbots, and the ankles leave a little bit to be desired with the Fanstoys. So tie there. Their articulation was even. Their sculpt, ironically, was even. This had much to do with certain ones doing certain things particularly well over the other and then tying in the rest. The lack of sculpted detail didn't do the Fanstoys any favors, and the lack of cohesive proportions didn't do the X-Transbots any favors. They tied in the presence because my family was split on them. However, they did prefer the build of the Fanstoys over that of the X-Transbots, so I can see how that point could be negligible. And they tied in the accuracy because they both kind of do it half right. Now, Fanstoys takes the lead in hardware because it uses some and the X-Transbots doesn't use any, and they also take the lead in the transformation because life is full of surprises. The X-Transbots takes accessories and gimmicks, which is predictable given X-Transbots. They usually do that. Surprisingly, they take the paint and scale. The alt mode is subjective, but I prefer it, and it's $10 cheaper, which brings us to a total score of 6-2 X-Transbots. This is very interesting. Let's talk about it for a bit.
Let me tell you why I think this one is interesting. First of all, I didn't think it was going to be such an ass whipping. I thought it was going to be closer, but I thought X-Transbots had a pretty solid chance of winning this. Just because this Fanstoy Sea Spray, it's good, but it's not saucy. You know what I mean? It doesn't have any pizzazz. And the X-Transbots does have a fair amount of pizzazz. Just things like throwing in 3 accessories beats the Fanstoys on that right out of the gate. Fanstoys, as we've been talking about a lot here recently, have been trading in the articulation for I don't know what, etc., etc. But let me tell you what I think is interesting. I think the Fanstoys one looks better than the X-Transbots. I would never swap out my Fanstoys for the X-Transbots. It comes down to that, like, wanting a thing to do a certain thing. Like, I want my figure to look really good from the front on my shelf. As soon as it checked that box in the sculpt paint category, that's pretty much where my money's gonna go most often. Like, whatever presents better from the frontal view, obviously to my subjectivity, is going to be where my money lies. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of subjectivity in this, as I even try to keep it objective, but stuff like the paint, you know, they both have a ton of paint on them. I think the metallic paint presents better. I think it looks better, so it gets the check for that. I think the alt mode looks better. That's going to be a subjective thing. The scaling wise, we have to use the Sunbow chart. Every time I do this, somebody points out that the Sunbow chart isn't accurate all the time, and it's the only thing I can do to have some sort of blueprint to work off of. It's just fascinating to me about this one that so many elements and components of the X-Transbot Sea Spray look so much better isolated. But when you put it all together and look at the full frontal view, so to speak, it doesn't look better than the Fanstoys one to me. And I just think that there's something interesting about that. There's a discussion point in there somewhere. So, yeah, that was it. Hope you found it at least interesting. I hope you're not running around with your feelings hurt. If it makes you feel any better, my favorite one didn't win either. You know what I mean? Hey, you win some, you lose some, but you live to fight another day. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.